Okay, we'll go with the program. Jerri Holan will be the first presenter. Holan will be the first presenter. And I have here 39 minutes each. Jerri says she might be quicker.
Okay, so hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to say thanks for coming and sharing your lunch with us. I'm going to show you a little 3-minute video before we start, and it probably encapsulates, it's a work in progress. This is the first cut. I'm having a video made for my website. So it should hopefully give you an overview of what I do. Hello, I'm Jerri Holan of Jerri Holan and Associates, and I'd like to thank you for letting me share my firm with you, along with the type of work that we do. Jerri Holan and Associates provides a wide range of architectural services for both public and private clients, and we work on both commercial and residential projects. Our design specialties include custom and residential remodels, the restoration and rehabilitation of historic structures, theaters and performing spaces, educational facilities, as well as tenant and landlord retail improvements. We also practice historic planning and consult with a number of Bay Area cities in reviewing historic projects for conformance to local and national rehabilitation standards. These tasks include historic resource evaluations, reports and surveys, reviews of landmark projects, local and national landmark nominations, as well as CEQA conformance. Jerri Holan and Associates has over 30 years' experience in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am very familiar with the cities here, with their planning and zoning ordinances and their building departments. Consequently, approvals are a smooth process. Another benefit of Jerri Holan and Associates is that it is a small firm. I am personally involved in every aspect of the practice, and projects received the expertise of a licensed professional at all levels of planning, design, and permit documentation. Jerri Holan and Associates is really an association of professionals, of which I am the president. I typically organize these professionals into staff teams according to what the individual project needs. For example, for my larger projects, I lead a team of professionals, including structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, civil and geotechnical engineers, landscape architects, as well as energy consultants. For my smaller projects, I typically only associate with structural engineers and energy consultants. Typical clients are building owners who are rehabilitating, remodeling, or restoring older buildings, such as heritage buildings, both public and private, sacred and secular. I am also very involved with many professional organizations such as the AIA and the California Preservation Foundation. And this year, Jerri Holan and Associates is celebrating 30 years in business. We serve the Greater Bay Area with an emphasis on the East Bay and Marin County. A portion of our services are dedicated to public interest and nonprofit groups. And that's it. Do I need to say anything more? It's very rough, but we're working on this, so it'll be on my website eventually. Okay, so now how do I start my regular PowerPoint on this? Okay, so now I have a little PowerPoint, like I said in the video, I do work on a lot of different types of buildings, and so I can't really pigeonhole myself to say I'm doing residential or I'm doing churches, or this is Rockridge Masonic Hall and the Orinda Country Club. So I basically just kind of have tailored this to my residential stuff. And so I'm just going to show you a couple projects, my 2 early favorite projects from residential projects, and then I'll go into a couple rehab projects. And then lastly, I will show you one of the historic planning reports that I did, and that's what this board is about. I did a really fun report a few years ago in Sonoma, and I won a California Preservation Foundation award for it. So to start with, we're going to look at some residential projects. And this is that little, bungalow in El Sombrante that the owner wanted to remodel, and the owner was a contractor. So I got to do a lot of fun things. And that's what it looked like when we finished. A lot of craftsmanship. It's probably overbuilt for the neighborhood, but it's pretty. The interior we gutted. So That is in El Sobrante. And here's one of my favorite projects too. This is it was just a little 1930s building over by home by Grand Lake, and nice neighborhood. This was the back of the house. We've all seen these houses, right? They're just kind of forgotten parts of the house, but they needed more room. And so we put a big family room on the ground floor and a new master suite above, and that's what it looked like now. And these photographs are early and they're not great, but this is the interior of the family room, and those are like 9-foot tall French doors. It was really a wonderful project. It came out really well, and that's standing in the dining room. You can see all the way through the house. We, of course, remodeled the kitchen as well. So, but we really opened up this little house so that they could enjoy their beautiful backyard more. And so now here's a lot of what I do is restoration projects, which I'm sure everybody here has worked on too, but you get a Victorian like this and the owner wants to restore it, and like, where do you start? Well, the first thing we did was we started cracking away at the stucco. And what was really nice is all the original redwood trim was still there. We had to replace very little of it. Yeah, and if you can see the windows up in the turret part is like they were curved windows, and we found somebody that could repair them because none of the windows even opened. And so the interior is pretty intact. We had the stairway and the foyer area, we had to do some wood restoration. The lighting fixtures were all gone, so we had to get new lighting fixtures, but we wanted to keep everything very period. And the kitchen and bathroom, of course, had to be gutted and started over. And so that's the kitchen, and the stained glass windows came from another old Victorian in Alameda. And then there's the bathroom, which used to be a laundry room, but I love it. It's got 10-foot tall ceilings, it's got a 6-foot high window, and it's a fun bathroom. Okay, here's another house. This is in Berkeley. It's, I guess, a kind of colonial transition home, and the owner died and left it to the University of California, Berkeley, and it had a brick foundation, and they wanted nothing to do with it. So the minute they got title to it, they put it on the market. My client bought it, and she was kind of like flipping houses, but in this case, she restored this one for her own family. And so we restored it. It was pretty much the main rooms on the main floor, like the living room and the dining room, were intact. The kitchens and all the bathrooms had to be redone. And while we were replacing the basement brick foundation, we decided to add an ADU down there for their mother-in-law. So it was a fairly large project. So you can see the dining room on the left was original. We put a direct vent fireplace in the old front, the fireplace front, and then on the right, of course, you can see the new kitchen, which I can't stand the cabinets, but anyway, she did a nice job with the metal ceiling. I thought was very period, and the light fixtures were all replaced as well. So now I'm going to show you a rehab project, and rehab is taking an old building and rehabbing it for a new use, and that happens a lot with older buildings. And this is a building I worked on a few years ago. This is what we started with. This used to be a theater, and if you can see, let me see, why is this not working? Where's my red? It was just working a minute ago. Do I have a red? I don't have my red anymore, huh? Oh, there it is, up there, okay. So it's not showing up on the screen. Okay, well, in any case, this was a furniture store. It was on the corner of San Pablo and Central for, I don't know, 50, 60 years, and they retired, they went out of business. And in the 60s, they had purchased this building next door, which was a theater, and they only used it for furniture storage. So when the building went up for sale, we all kind of walked through it and said, wow, the theater inside was still there. All the interior finishes were still intact. The only thing that was missing was this facade. So there was a kind of a local group of people that kind of organized a bunch of people, and they petitioned the city council to buy the building and restore the theater, because they had been looking for a place to put a theater in El Cerrito for 10 years, and there was all these controversial projects and proposals. And so this kind of solved a lot of their problems. And they also had redevelopment money, which we don't have anymore. And it wasn't like the neighborhood was blighted, but the building was really blighted. So we didn't know where to start when the interior was gutted. We had to do all new mechanical, electrical, plumbing, handicap, put a kitchen in there and all that good stuff. But we didn't know where to start with the facade. So we just kind of did something that was contemporary, maybe some overtones of Art Deco. And then about a month or two after we finished schematics, some local citizen found a picture of the theater in the 1960s, and that's what it looked like. So now we had the facade we could recreate, which really kind of took a lot of responsibility off our shoulders, but this was an expensive facade. And if you notice, the sign on the blade, the marquee on the blade sign says, "Save on Kiefer's clearance sale." So he was using this huge sign for his business, and then all the other merchants, this is right across from Pastime, got really mad at him because he was getting all this, you know, it's way bigger. I mean, it's not like a regular sign ordinance. So they made him take it down. And it got thrown away. We don't know where it went. It went into some landfill somewhere. And we spent like almost $200,000 recreating that. So anyway, the interior was gutted. Here's the actual theater itself. We divided the big space into two theaters, the main theater downstairs and a little theater upstairs. And we actually had to take off all the plaster, because that's one of the biggest hazards in an old theater, is the plaster falling in an earthquake. It's just old and doesn't have any strength. This particular plaster was in really good shape. It wouldn't come out of the button board. But I wanted to point out, I wish this thing worked on the screen. I wanted to point out, if you look, that's the stage, that's the screen stage right there, and around it was a historic mural that's of really good quality. So we had to protect that. But when we took the plaster off, part of rehabilitation, you always have to keep a little bit of the original material so you can compare the original to what was originally there. So that like 2 feet of plaster right near the stage was what we saved, and some of the detailing up there. We had great painters, by the way. I could highly recommend them. And then this is kind of what it looks like after. So everything was restored, you know, new seating and everything and all that. But it's a really, I apologize for the photographs on this thing. It was like the opening night. I just went around with my point and shoot. But you can see that first foot of plaster that we kept. It's got a little bit of a different shade to it. But I think what's really funny, if you look up at the top where the robin egg blue is, the first foot is like almost navy blue. But when we took the plaster down and you scraped it off, the original color was baby blue. But back in the day, they used to smoke in theaters, so all the smoke would rise up and it stained the plaster. It was hysterical. Anyway, and that's the second theater upstairs. This was opening night. And I wanted to just mention that these were the original light fixtures, and we restored all of them. So the chandelier, it's really cool. You get up on the roof and you kind of crank it down to change the lamps. And then the wall sconce over on the far left was original, and those we had about 4 or 6 of those, and we restored those. And this is the lobby again. Apologize for the photograph. It's opening night. Had a few glasses of wine, but this is the original lobby, and all the paint, the ceiling painting, and everything was original, and the Art Deco mirror was still there, and it basically was carted off site during construction and then carted back. And we only got like 1 screwdriver scratch on it, but it's intact and it's still there. Of course, the casework we added, and that's what it looks like afterwards. And so it was a very successful project. We won a few awards, and everybody in the neighborhood is very happy with it. Here's another one that I've been working on for about 5 years. I'll probably be working on it for another 10 years or so. This is the old Hillside School in Berkeley, and it was built in 1925 by Walter Ratcliffe. 1930s, the city went and reinforced all their schools for seismic improvements. We've lost a lot of the bric-a-brac on the building. If you notice around the entries, there's a lot of plaster ornamentation. That's all been gone. And here's a picture of it in 33. This is the entire school. And so the city ran this for a while, operated this till about 1960. And then they started renting it out because it happens to be located right on top of the Hayward Fault. And it's also in a really big landslide area, not to mention a fire hazard area. So it's got some environmental issues. But the city rented it from 1960 to 1982 or something, or 19, they started renting it in 1982. And then in about 2002, 2005, they just decided to sell it. They didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't even want the liability of tenants in it. There was no maintenance. It was falling apart. So a German school, the German International School bought it. And this was originally elementary school, K through 6, or 5, K through 6, I think. So the German International School bought it. They're kind of like a prep school, and they loved the building. They took care of it. They put it on it to expand, add some more classrooms and make it bigger. And the city said, yes, you can expand, but because there are school children in there, you have to mitigate hazards to less than 0. So there's no known way to do landslide, to mitigate a landslide in combination with an earthquake. The engineering does not exist, period. We know how to make it fire safe. So the German schools put it on the market, and they moved. They're down in the peninsula somewhere now. And it was up for sale for a while, and the few people that had some interest, I mean, had a lot of maintenance. Few people had some, came in with the client, they wanted to divide, it's composed of 20 parcels. This was created, 20 houses burned down in the fire in 1923, the school burnt down the original one, so the city bought the 20 parcels and made a schoolyard out of it, and of course it's stucco and, you know, slate roof, so there's no fire hazard anymore. But anyway, the neighbors didn't want single family, a bunch of, 20 new single family homes in the neighborhood. There wasn't much else that could have been there, maybe a dormitory, because it was single family zoned. But my client eventually bought it, and he had been looking for a home in the 10,000 square foot range, and he wanted to build an art studio in it. And he was, he's a millionaire from Finland. I guess he runs a company similar to Amazon. So he was looking in the, like that, $8 to $10 million bracket, and he'd put in an offer about 4 houses, and we're talking about big houses all over the Bay Area. He got outbid on every single one of them. So his realtor came and said, there's this building in Berkeley. If you can think outside the box, you might be able to put your studio and your art center in it, but it's got 50,000 square feet. So he went and looked at it, he said, this is perfect, and he bought it for $4 million, $5 million, so he thought he was getting a deal. And then after about a year, he contacted me. I knew a neighbor that lived there, and he contacted me, and I said, man, you need a historic preservation architect. You don't just need an architect. This building is incredible. So anyway, he hired me, and I've been working ever since. The building is in pretty good shape. The northern part of it will remain the northern part, and I think, I have the next one. This is the auditorium on the north end of the building. And then the center part of it is a 2-story part, and it's all classrooms. And so all those classrooms will stay intact, but he's going to let his friends make art there. It won't be rented for any commercial purpose, but he's a maker. He likes to make things, and he goes to Burning Man every year, and all his friends are burners. And so it's going to be a very lively space. So that's, and his office is in his main office. He's still, he's still the board of directors in his company in Finland. Is that bay, the bay up on the second floor to the right. That's his office, and it's a really cool space. This is the back end of it. This is what we call Frankenwall. This was totally failing. The foundation has been undermined by water. It was like a bathtub. The water just collected. The whole thing's failing, and it's actually a mess. We're working on the structural part of things now. So basically, the estimates came in we got through planning and zoning to rezone it from a school to a single family home, and it was crazy going through with this project, but we did it. The structural part of this was about $5 million, and the architecture is about $5 million. So we are now just pursuing phase 1 with the structural part. But this is the main part of where all the work is going to take place. So that first floor, the ground floor, will be a garage. The second floor, I think right now we've got it using as a yoga studio. And then the third floor up there will be his penthouse. And it's going to be really cool, because that penthouse, I can see the Campanile, I can see the bridge, I can see everything. It's just wonderful. But anyway, so here's the southern end of the building and the kindergarten, and this is his personal maker studio. And the doors and windows, it faces south, the doors and windows are falling apart. There used to be awnings, he won't put awnings back. So we had to replace the windows because he couldn't get in and out of them. So we basically matched the existing there, but instead of doing, like, we had 2 windows with 2 side lights, the door leaf and the side light is actually a door leaf. So we combined them. So we got a bigger, wider opening for his equipment going in there. This is the third floor. This is his penthouse, eventually be a penthouse. And those are the southern facing windows. And then this wall in the middle comes out. That will become the penthouse. This is the kitchen space. This was an addition on the back of the building. It's really bad. The framing is really crappy. So we're going to have to reinforce all that. This is one of the classrooms. That's now the gym workout, but you can see all the big old windows are still there, and all the chalkboards we're keeping. And this is where most of the work is occurring. This is the big foundation in the bottom of the Frankenwall. It's a 30-inch deep, 60 by 60 mat slab. The thing is huge. What? Yeah, totally new. So all the in the 3-story part of the building, it will be all new structural elements. We will have 2 moment frames in this level, and then the big moment frame goes all the way up to the 3rd level. But the amount of water, I mean, I really have spent 2 years doing civil engineering on this site because of the huge rains that we've had, and it's never been taken care of on this site. So now we have a really, really great water system. In fact, I was looking at it last week. It's like a river running in it, but none of the water was taken care of. And when they put the addition on the back end of this building in the 60s, they just kind of rerouted all the water, and the water was just ponding underneath the building. So now we've got it going out. And this is what contractors find every week. They find another beer can or another booze bottle, and we're just not sure who was drinking in the school. You know, was it the teachers? Was it the students? Was it the janitors? You know, but you can see this Salute Lager beer was real popular, as was Rainier. You know, anyway, so we're keeping a collection. And then lastly, this is historic planning, and I do a lot of this, as I said in the video. And I'm going to show you this project that I did a lot of work on. Basically, the city of Sonoma hired me to evaluate a cottage that they had deemed, some historic planner back in the 80s had said it wasn't historic, and it was on city land. The original train depot had been turned into a museum, and there were still a few houses around it. And one of the main houses, which is 200 feet from it, was this little home that was inhabited by Camille Aguillon, and he's a French guy, and he put Sonoma on the map. He was a big wine distributor, grew his own grapes, big agriculture. And when the train depot went in there, at first the train depot was on Sonoma Plaza, and there were complaints about it being so dirty. So they put it on, they moved it over here to First Street. And then all these kind of farmers and wine growers kind of built houses all around there. So the Masonavi estate was inhabited by Camille Aguillon for many, many years. It got sold when he died. His wife sold it way back when. But it's probably the most important Victorian building in the city of Sonoma. And that's on the National Register. So the cottage that was deemed not historical was a little hotel. It was, I'm going to say, a rooming board house that Camille would put his guests at, and that was the cottage I was hired to evaluate. So what happened was, in the early 2000s, they were going to take the cottage down. The city didn't want it on the thing. They didn't know what to do with it. It was too small to do anything. And all the preservationists protest. They said, we want a reevaluation. This thing is definitely historic. So they hired me. And so I call it the train cottage, and I had to evaluate it. And so here's the original train depot in 1941. And it closed in, I think, 49. And here's the train depot today. It's the museum. It's all nicely restored. And here's the Masonavi main house. This is what we call folk Victorian, simple square things. This was very popular in rural areas where they didn't have a lot of access to fancy woodwork and stuff, but due to the railroads, they could import little pieces here and there, but they just simply took these simple rural houses and then stuck these fancy porches on them, and that's it. That's the extent of the style. So here it is in like 1912, and then this is what it looks like today. You can see some of the pieces are missing, but this is on the National Register. The Sonoma Preservation Society keeps it as a museum, and they have events there and everything else. So it's a nice, well-loved and well-cherished building. This is the cottage that I was supposed to evaluate. Now, this cottage sits in between the train depot and the main house. And I don't know who looked at this in 1980, but to say this cottage is not historic they've got to be sleeping at the wheel. I think they were intentionally told to not make it historic because the city wanted nothing to do with it. They can't figure out what to do with it. So I kind of took a look at it. I'm like 50 feet from the train. I said, no, I think this is historic. So I told the city, I said, I think it's historic. And so I said, yeah, you can't take this down. It belongs to the thing. But I walked around the neighborhood, and within I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4 blocks, there were a dozen of these, like what I call folk architecture buildings. This particular one was quite famous. It was a bowling. It was a pub, a bowling alley, and a rooming board house in the back. And I can't see what I have on the slide there, but anyway, so that was one of the buildings. This is another one that's right across the street, another folk architecture. Here's another one. This one here, there was the Italian Sebastiani, this was his house. So there was a number of big wine people that live in this neighborhood. So I went, this is crazy. There's a bunch of these Victorians. So I went, looked at the 1923 Sanborn map, and I kind of pegged all these are the original buildings that were built and, that were there in this neighborhood in 1923. And I walked around, and like 17 or 18 of them were still there. I mean, the green ones I think were missing, but they were all kind of intact. And so what I did in my report, I said, you know what, this building is a resort, this little cottage is a resource, and we have to keep it. But not only do you have this resource here, you've got a historic district here. Now, this is a block from the Sonoma Plaza, which is on the National Register. It's all Spanish Mission and style stuff. This is the other side of Sonoma. This is the agricultural side, the American side, more settled by, local farmers. So they got a lot of press. The newspaper, showed up at one of the city council meetings. And the thing is this is the important thing. The first report. So with historic preservations, when you do with historic preservation planning work, when you look at a building, you have to have a context statement, like what is it important for? And the original report that said the building was not significant, her context statement was American architecture between 1850 and 1950. Well, if that's your context statement, that little cottage is not going to be significant. But after I looked at it, I said, that's the wrong context statement. Here's the right one. Rural Victorian railroad and residential development from the time the railroad went in until the time the railroad went out. So any building in that area. So that went to the Landmarks Commission, and the Landmarks Commission said, wow, we really like this. So yeah, let's do a district. So that's what's happening right now. They've hired Page and Turnbull. They're turning it into a district, and everybody's happy because of all the push for more housing. Everything is getting, all these older buildings and smaller buildings are getting kind of, taken over by developers. So that's Jerri Holan and Associates, and that's all I have to say. If you want to ask questions, I'm sure. Go ahead, Donald.
Jerri, when you were a young person, architectural student, something like that, was traditional architecture your method at that time also?
No, I think what happened was I grew up in Miami, and they don't have anything old. I mean, their buildings are built after World War II, when we had airplanes and air conditioners and so on and so forth. So I grew up in a stark modern thing, and I went to college at University of Florida, which is contemporary. All the teachers, it was nothing but contemporary. Mies van der Rohe, and there were a couple. But anyway, so I would always get these projects, and they would be restoring old buildings. And so I would say, oh, just keep the building and we can build around it. And so one of my teachers actually encouraged me. I was the only one in like a class of 50 that liked old buildings, and I was really the odd sheep out, the odd man out. But then when I came to Berkeley, it was everything I wanted. We preserve old buildings in Berkeley. So that's how I got there.
So if someone were to ask you, I come to you and say, I got a lot, I'd like to put a new building on it, would you sort of recreate the traditional style in that?
If they left me up to my own devices, usually owners have a good vision, and so you always hope that your client has the same vision that you do. But that happened to me just yesterday. In fact, a client called up. They're working on a Marin County Development Center, and they bought a historic estate. And they wanted to take it down. The architect wanted to take it down, and I said, "You can't. It's got an evaluation. It's got a primary record. A friend of mine did the evaluation a few years ago, and it's eligible for the National and the California Register. So no, it's a historic resource. You can't take it down. You can build around it, and we have national guidelines that say here's how you restore an older building, like we did with the Cerrito Theater. We couldn't Although the Cerrito Theater, we saved the interiors. The interiors are usually never covered, but the exteriors have to be preserved within these guidelines. So it's easy to add on to them, but they usually cost a lot to rehab. There's usually structural and electrical and mechanical stuff that go along with it, but it's still greener to restore an old building and spend a lot of money than it is to build a new building, and that's my mantra.
And in your buildings, there are all kinds of evidence that some very careful choices are being made about colors and materials and things like that.
Yeah.
How do you place your clients in that? I mean, are they a high influence, or does it vary by project?
It varies by, it depends on the client. I mean, they can ask my opinion. I say, well, my expert opinion is do this color or that kind of, material or whatever. But it's usually up to them. And the good clients, of course, listen to me. The clients that you don't really like so much don't. I had one client in Albany, I did like a two-story, addition for him. And no matter what I said, he did the exact opposite. They loved me. I mean, after 2 years, I'm like, why did you hire me? We've all been there. Yeah, but so, yeah, it's whatever the client really needs and wants, but I always give them my opinion and it's not always followed.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I
And
actually went years ago, it kind of goes full circle to open house studios, and there were a lot of artists in that building.
in the, in the school, in the Hillside School, yeah, there still was. My daughter went to Girl Scout camp there. We did Montessori Berkeley, had their school in there for a while. I mean, everybody has had experience with that Hillside School. And I remember the first time I'm walking around with the owner going, man, this would be a really cool house. This would be super cool, but, I had an open slate for the penthouse and that made sense. And then it was like, okay, what do you do with these classrooms? And so, well, that's a bedroom for one child. That's another bedroom for another. This will be the living. So it's just been crazy, but the scale's really nice. But luckily he's spending a lot of money to fix it first because he wants his half of the building to be safe. And I said, but you know what? You'll be in the auditorium when the earthquake hits. So maybe we ought to do the audit. Nope, I'm not doing the auditorium yet. So it's been ongoing. Okay, how do I turn this off? So, oh, yeah.
I just wanted to mention I was at the Berkeley Planning Commission meeting last night,
Mhm.
and it looks like they may decide to do some historic resource survey.
Uh-huh.
So they know what, so they're in comply with their new regulations that they're making, so you might want to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, no, Berkeley knows me. I mean, the staff down there I'm pretty good with, and they usually kind of can steer people in towards me. And Baja is very. I'm used to be on the board of Baja for 10 years, so I think that the good thing that I have seen in practice now, had 30 years of practicing now. When I first started out, California law says any building over 50 years is a potential historic resource. So before you modify it, let's evaluate and see if it is a historic resource. And then there's certain standards, what a building would need to do to get on the California register. That's the CEQA.
It's not just the building, I think they can do it on a larger scale.
Yeah, and they probably should do it that way. That's what San Francisco did and Los Angeles did the main one. And I've done the survey work for Larkspur, the city of Larkspur. I'm the historic consultant for Larkspur and Sausalito. And we had to survey that. It takes a long time though, and it involves a landmarks board. But yeah, and so what's nice now is most cities, other than Albany, I don't know, my city doesn't like preservation, will, if it's a building that's over 50, will say get a historic resource evaluation. So I'm doing a lot of those. I've had two controversial ones over in Sausalito. They were contemporary, and they were like 1962, and this house was built in 1972. And I said, well, they have potential to be historic, but the planner said, no, they're not historic. They're not historic, so they don't have to get a review. But in general, more cities, and Berkeley especially, if older than 50, you have to get a historic resource evaluation. So, oh yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So back to the conversion of the school.
Yeah.
When you started that project, was there sort of a master plan for the development, or with like an eccentric developer and he kind of like, is it?
He had a vision. No, he had a vision for the whole thing. And I mean, when we went through planning, we had to get really close. We had to hours of operation. How many artists are going to be there? Where are you going to park? So we had the whole pretty good outline. I think things have changed since then. I mean, year by year, and it's taking so long. The playground in front of the building, we were going to have as just put some sheds out there for outside art, because he does these big, maker pieces. And that's probably still happening. But depending on how the economy goes, he's also considering maybe taking 2 or 3 parcels off and selling those, to kind of help pay for, So I don't know what's going to happen. This neighborhood is really controversial, if anybody knows, the neighborhood.
So it's kind of this thing that just keeps evolving.
It keeps evolving, and year by year things change, but I mean, there's a general overall structure to it. The southern half is residential for him and his family, and the northern half is always going to be art studios of some nature, yeah.
What I really like about your projects is you're saving something that seems to have some value.
Yeah.
Like with Baja, I go crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
When they just show you these things, it's like, what is there here that's worth saving?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, well, sometimes there is nothing worth saving, you know, I mean, it's like this one that I looked at yesterday. I mean, it looks like a piece of, you know, pile of just wood and no foundation. I mean, the floor is black, but unfortunately, it's part of the estate, you know, so it does become historical. But yeah, no, it does, I do like to save things. I tend to save more things than not, but on the interiors, you just kind of let it go because that's not kind of controlled or regulated. It's just the exterior that when you have a landmark that has to be preserved. And I had a beautiful home in San Francisco, a client, it was on the National Register. It was a beautiful old colonial Mason building, and the inside had beautiful plaster work all over it, but the layout was really bad, but he gutted it, and it's all modern, you know. He couldn't touch the windows, though, you know, so anyway, it's painful when that happens. Yeah.
Is the train district, is it a little north of downtown?
Yeah. If you know where the train depot is, it's right around there.
Yeah, I know where the ballpark is, and I think it's.
Yeah, it's right there. It's across the street from the ballpark. Yeah. Yeah, they do programs. They have history tours and stuff there, and now they're going to start doing tours of the district. But they know more about the little individuals, like Sebastiani's there. There's another famous wine grower that had his home there, because they all wanted to be by the railroad so they could ship their wine out, because till the railroad got there, everything was by steamer and by boat, and it was, or stagecoach, and it was really slow, which is not good for wine, number one, but just not good for anything. So once they got the railroad in there, that just kind of, the whole area just bloomed, and Sonoma became a recreational destination vacation place, you know, so it's a nice little area. Cindy, how do I turn this on? Thank you. Yeah.
So we did intros already. I'm Kurt Lavenson. My company's Lavenson Design. It's just me, basically. It's sole proprietorship. I don't have a video, so I'm explaining this part in person. And so I work out of our house, and I always have, and I like that freedom a lot. And as we all know, I think there's a lot of small outfits in the small firm form. It kind of limits some of the jobs you can go after, but I really have always liked the freedom of, being my own boss. And I've been lucky with a good variety of projects. So some of you who know me know I was a contractor before I was an architect. And that's what this panel up here is about, is I went to architecture school, and then I went into construction because it seemed a lot more fun to me. Like, I worked for architects, and it was okay, but it was a lot of lettering and erasing and rolling plans and putting them in the right drawer. And then in construction, which I sort of needed to do to make money to put myself through school, it was like we were outdoors and we were making stuff and yelling and screaming, and it was just a lot more fun. And I pretty quickly ended up doing design build, which then ultimately I dropped the build part and just went and got my architect's license, which I'd sort of left behind, and caught up and did architecture straight. It's about 20 years now. I think I might be retired. Donald asked me this question earlier. I think the answer is sort of becoming yes. And I do some writing and some teaching, and I don't know what else, but somehow the days fly. So I called a few jobs that were sort of significant for me. And so a big one was when I was a contractor and the Oakland Hills fire hit. I got a job through, kind of a friend of a friend thing, and I got to work up in that area. It was like just devastation up there. And it also had this interesting like graveyard effect, because the chimneys were standing at all the properties. And I'll come back to that. And I learned very quickly to fight with insurance companies and fight over money with people that did that all day long. And it was pretty interesting. I learned a lot. And this is about how the owner, for her, it was the romantic. She had lost her first house, so she was really upset and wanted her house back. And the insurance company was just all about the numbers. And luckily, I'm pretty good with numbers and spreadsheets and computers. I've always sort of embraced that. So I sort of held my own with them. And they tried hard to beat me up because I was just a one-man shop. And they even called me like just a remodeling contractor, which turned out to be my secret weapon, because this really was remodeling. There was nothing left, but it was all about replacement of the existing, house, getting this woman back what she had. So I kind of outmaneuvered the bigger builders that the insurance companies brought in to look at this and do fancier spreadsheets and pretend that the house should be different. And so we prevailed, and I got her house back, and I also ended up in fine home building for it, which was pretty fun for me, because there was on the right. I got great recognition for it. So here's the house after. We redid the chimney, that's not the old one, but we treated it, as a monument. I mean, the thing was a totem from the start, right? And it's a very handmade house. Everything was plaster, wood. We made all these trusses. It was highly crafted, very sculptural. Here's just I had a friend, I lucked into a carpenter friend. He wasn't a friend until we did this job together, and he could do everything, including building these trusses. And he liked to make fun of me, and because I was just this architecture student in over my head. And he had actually worked for the foundation contractor and then drove back by the site like 3 months later. And we had framed our way up to sort of the floor level. And he just was laughing at us, because we were so slow, and he just offered to help. And I was like, yes, we need help. And he just took me right through, took all of us up through the top, made the trusses on the property next door on the flat slab of their garage that had burned down. He just, nothing stopped him. And so here's a shot from the outside. We kept all the quirky sort of cottage details. There's a funny, since I'm in a room of architects, there's a funny detail on this roof. The venting for this roof is actually upslope, like about 1.5 feet on the roof, because it was sort of the beginning of the WUI codes. After this whole neighborhood burned down, they didn't want any eave vents or attic vents. And I still believed I could vent a roof, which I no longer believe, but I still believed I could vent a roof that had like rigid insulation and sleepers and stuff. So we did it that way. I think it worked, but it was super fussy. The interior, the turret at the front became quite a beautiful room with, sort of a sundial, the way the light would shine in there each day. And then this is the experience kind of moving through the space and the staircase. And I played with different flooring materials, but mostly this thing was about light and shapes. It was wonderful. And she was very happy there. The next big job I went on to was kind of a life change also. Leslie, my wife, who you met earlier, we got married, and I'll just jump ahead for a second. Leslie found this property. Leslie has amazing real estate radar. She is the hunter. She finds this stuff and we fix it up. And she found this property for us, which there's a quick site plan. It was a house and a garage that had been converted into kind of a partial cabana, and there was a pool in front, and the entry was kind of funny. You came in across the pool, and we redid it all, including the pool, which was a learning experience for me. And so it became this, and the cabana became our office. So it was like the best home office ever.
Where is it?
This is out in Alamo. So we don't live out there anymore. We live in Oakland, but this is out in Alamo. You can kind of see Mount Diablo under the tree, under the big oak tree there. And it was Eichler-ish. This house was not an Eichler, but kind of Eichler-ish. And so we kind of rolled with that modern vibe. And here, that's our dog, who's no longer with us. And did someone ask something?
Did you build it as well?
The house?
You designed it and built, did the renovation yourself?
I did, yeah. We did the design together.
Yeah.
I did all the plans. I did all the construction with help, with subs, but, I was already an experienced general, so it wasn't that big a deal. I mean, it was a big deal, but I could do it. So, but I didn't build it from scratch. I built it from this, right? A really interesting happened, which is we sold this house and moved back to Oakland, and the guy who bought it was an architect. And so we had a funny thing. We were out in Alamo in this very modern house, and people loved it. At open house, they'd say, oh, it looks like it's in a magazine, but nobody made any offers. Because out there was like, they were all into the Tuscan mansion with the columns and the big drapes. So they'd walk through, but nobody wanted it. So there was an architect from Berkeley a guy named Jerry Domer, in case any of you know him. You do? So there was an architect from Berkeley who wanted to retire. Yeah, who wanted to retire. Yeah, he has passed. He wanted to retire, he and his wife, out there. And she was a horse person, and they wanted to be, this property had a barn as well. And so he's like, I want your house. So it was the only way we were ever going to sell this house, was if another architect bought it. You know, now, of course, modern is like so groovy, everybody wants it, but it wasn't then. And then he remodeled it, and I had never been remodeled before. I do remodels, but I hadn't been remodeled. And it was cool. They had us out, and they were apologetic. They were afraid we would be offended. Now, most of what you see in this picture is our work, but we had kept like wooden ceilings and wooden beams and kept some of that 60s vibe. And he came in there and he's like, too much wood. You know, other people would come in and go, oh, it's like a gallery. All the walls are white. I love the wood ceiling. He came in and went, what's with the wood ceiling? So he sheetrocked all that, cut some skylights through, made the place even bigger and better. And we loved it. It's like, we are so not offended. We actually love it. So that was an interesting lesson and very exciting. Shoe on the other foot, so to speak. So this is another house that we never lived in together, but Leslie grew up in. This is her childhood home in the Central Valley. A ranch house that was her dad had built for the family, and he designed it with the builder. And I've always loved it. It's very like Sunset Homes, low slung, kind of Frank Lloyd Wright eaves. And it was a very good ranch house. When her parents redid it, they remodeled it like on the left. That's the kitchen they did in the 70s. 1970?
That's when they did that kitchen.
And
The 1950 kitchen.
And the cool things then were electric cooking. That stove slides out. I'd never seen anything like that. The ceilings, which were only 8 feet high, were apparently too tall. They made them lower and brought them down to 7 and put a translucent ceiling and fluorescent light fixtures. So we, of course, ripped all that out and made it look like the right, which looks like this. And we did an IKEA kitchen, which we had never done before. So, but there's no IKEAs in the Central Valley. So we had to come up and I designed it and worked out the part and played with all the catalogs. And then we bought the thing at the Emeryville IKEA. And then I had to truck it down. I had to rent like a rider truck and get a couple pallets of boxes. Leslie inventoried them when we got to the house. There was like 210 boxes this kitchen came in. So it was fun. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Here's another view. The other thing we did was open it up to the left. It was mostly opened, and there was a beamed ceiling. We took some of those down, and then there was a window out to, I think you will see it in a second. Here's another interior. Okay, the doors, the French doors on the right were a window in a breakfast nook, and there was a big built-in bar where that high-top table is. So we opened it up to the backyard and then opened it into a room that her parents had put on as sort of a home office, and that's behind the barn door, and painted out the beams and redid the floors and just opened it all, So Leslie did this to the porch outside. We did it together over many years. I built the roof like 20 years ago and then tiled it, and Leslie went safari with the drapes. And this was during the moments when it wasn't either like 1,000 degrees or 4 degrees outside, this was a favorite place to hang out. This project in Piedmont was a big design review. Interesting Freudian slip. This was a big design review zoo problem for me. To do this project, I had to get like 2 variances, and I totally changed the style of the house, which you'll see in a second. We ended up, let me hop ahead. It looked like this when I got there. And the owner, the wife is an artist, and the husband was kind of an architect junkie. And they wanted something more like this. And so we had worked together before, oddly enough, on this guy's Victorian. We had done a Victorian restoration before that looked more like one of Jerry's projects. But he said, I'm not into that anymore at all. I want modern. I want everything modern. So we made this very gallery-like space. Oh, all right, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll stick to the planning department. See the dotted red line? This was my big move, and Piedmont loved it. I technically shrunk this house. I took the chimney off the left, and I lowered the height of the house. But I also put an addition on it, so I didn't really shrink the floor plan, but I shrunk the impact of the house, because then we did this. We went with all flat roofs, and I was able to give my clients more space inside, but I gave the city kind of a reduced envelope outside. And they loved it, and they really got on board with us completely changing the style. So there's again, the red dashed lines show the old roof line compared to what I had done. The house is 3 stories on the downslope. I only did the top floor, which is the street level. The bottom 2 stories were quiet to me, which is why they're grayed out here. And I do everything in Revit, so that I wanted to throw this in because here's my site plan with, I doubt you can see most of the lines, but there's several variances drawn in, and an addition I put on the house to fill in a corner. But I try to always include 3D, pieces of my Revit 3D model, because I just find that the more you can help people understand and not have them get lost in your drawings, asking you kind of all the wrong questions, the things you don't really want to talk about, it just helps so much. This is how it looked inside. This is looking toward, the front door is over to the left in that enclosed area. The ceilings were 8.5 or so feet. You can see the effect of the sloped ceiling. And this is what it looked like, the same view when we were done. Front door is in the same location. Now I've taken off the roof and grabbed 3 feet of space from the attic and just made everything big and bright and tall. The clear story windows on the left show a remnant of a window that I took out. There used to be windows all the way that far in the room, and we kept the clear story. Well, the clear story was brand new. We removed a window that looked at a neighbor, which really helped get that neighbor on board, because that's where the addition is, where that extra clear story and that particular double window is where there had been a notch in the building, and I was making it bigger. So I was encroaching more on this neighbor. But we convinced them that it was going to be better for them because we took off a piece of deck that was over there, and we took off a window that looked right in their house. So they became a fan and wrote a letter of support, and that really helped. This was also an interesting job because the contractor totally took over, and I was never there. The owner found a design build contractor, and they were very good, and he just kind of wanted to save money and just work with them. They respected my design a lot, but they also added things like I had the roof extending over the deck out there. They changed it and created this soffit thing that came in the kitchen and also became the roof, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, they did a nice job. And I think because they were so involved, they fell in love with the design, not only their parts, but my part. So they kept it. And it was on the tour, the AIA tour, and also got published a few different times. I got a good 15 minutes of fame out of that. And from there, I went to 12 years in Sonoma. Actually, it overlapped. Excuse me one sec. This was a project I was brought in as the second architect. This is where my construction background helps me a lot, is I can keep up with contractors. I can keep up with site changes. Revit helps me a lot. I do all my own Revit work. I taught myself Revit because I had gone to school to learn AutoCAD, and it was a pretty easy jump to make. But I'm always working the model as things change on site and as I make adjustments, so I always have a pretty accurate thing going on. And it makes me more nimble. And this was an owner, kind of a wealthy owner, and a really smart, nimble contractor. And they were always changing things and adjusting. And they blew up the first architect. They ended up firing him because he couldn't keep up. He was like, oh, that's a change. Well, let me come out and look, and then I'll have my draftsman draw it up, and then I'll bring it back and we'll talk about it. And this drove my client, who was one of these I built a computer company guys, It drove him nuts because he was used to, like a lot of smart people, making changes quickly, working it out and building it, and I could keep up. So they brought me in on this, and this was kind of this was my audition, was the cabana. We built this pool before the house, and we retained the hillside to, brought the hillside up and then dug in a pool and did the cabana. And after I did that, I guess I passed the test because they let me do the house.